Hello, everyone. This is Pastor Alan Hathaway at the Garrison Church of God. I'm glad you chose to join me for this particular little sermonette. I'm going to be talking to you a little bit about Mother's Day, but particularly about the power of a woman. And I'm taking my thought out of Exodus chapter 3, verses 21 and 22. I was struck by that passage as I was reading through it the other day and thinking about the importance that God placed on the women of Israel. And if you don't know anything about that particular passage, God is calling Moses, and he is calling him to go back to Egypt and to bring the children of Israel out of Egypt. But in the very midst of that discussion, he stops Moses and tells him, I want you to tell the women of Israel to go and ask the Egyptian women for gold and silver and garments, because I will through that give them favor with the Egyptians, and I will allow them to plunder the Egyptians for all the evil that they have done to the Israelite people. And I found that a fascinating thought process. The power of these women, and why had God given so much emphasis to the women of Israel in this particular passage? It went really back to the birth of Moses himself. Moses had been born at a very ugly time. Prior to Moses' time, there had been an order by the Pharaoh that the midwives who assisted the Israelite women, they were to kill any male child that came out of the womb, as they were assisting to find a secretive way of killing the male children. When the midwives didn't cooperate, Pharaoh ordered all of the Israelite women to throw their sons into the river Nile. It was a horrible concept of absolute mayhem and destruction of the Israelite people. It was ethnic cleansing without a question. And so that we come to this point of God's saying to Moses, I want you to go back to Egypt, and I want you to proclaim to the women of Israel that I have seen this situation, and I will redress it by plundering the Egyptians and ultimately by taking from them their eldest sons. It is a horrible judgment, and yet God is repaying on these Egyptian women their silence when their men and the leaders of their country were willing to murder the children of the Israelite people. And so God is returning on their heads the wickedness that they permitted in their land. And that's a really frightening, and it should be a sobering reality to us. We have come to a point in our culture where we devalue motherhood. We devalue this process of raising children, as it were. And yet, every developmental psychologist will tell you that the most critical phase of development in any human's life comes between birth and the age of 8. Those are the critical years when so many things are laid down in the foundations of a person's character, are laid down in the foundation of their morality, their way of viewing the world and what is important, is laid down in their understanding of how to deal with their own emotions and how to work their way through problems and difficulties, and their way of actually absorbing knowledge is set up in those early first 8 years of existence. The one person who is the most important for a child at that stage is their mother. And their mother is the one who sort of lays down those structures for a child. They are the one who helps them navigate through these difficult years and allows them a sense of safety as they proceed through it. But as we devalue that, then we will raise a generation of children who, quite honestly, will lack the kinds of skills and the necessary abilities to deal with life. And that is tragic. God knew that from the very beginning. In fact, in Genesis chapter 3, verse 20, in the very depth of despair in the garden, when Adam and Eve have fallen and God has pronounced judgment on Adam and Eve and all of humanity, there is only one bright ray of hope in verse 20. And that's when Adam turns to this woman who is his wife and gives her the name Eve. That name means mother of the living or source of life. It is the sense that she is the hope of humanity. She is the one who has the ability to give birth to children. She is the one who will guide them through those formative years and help to create culture and society and direction and purpose. And so Adam understands how critical Eve is to the future of humanity, if it's even going to survive. And then he can look even further because of God's pronouncements to them that she or her descendants will bring forth the Messiah, the hope of salvation, the promise of salvation to all humanity. And so there is a real sense in which this concept of motherhood is extremely important in our culture. And we cannot really replace it effectively because a mother is invested in children, is invested in a child in a way that no one else in society can be. She has carried that child and nurtured it in her own body. She has cuddled it close and spoken to it. It has heard her voice more than any other voice in the womb. That child has come to understand that this person is a source of safety. But what happens when you take that all away? What happens to our culture, to our society, when all of that is taken away? Now, I know not all mothers are good mothers, and I know not all women are going to be able to be mothers, and I understand that. And I appreciate the tremendous contribution that women make in all fields of our society. But there is nothing more important in all of human structure and culture than the raising of children, especially those first critical years of life. They are absolutely essential if culture is to continue and society is to be civil to one another. And so we need to honor women who raise their families, who take the effort and the time and work through the problems of raising children. It is not easy. It is a difficult and at times frustrating task. But it is one of the most important tasks in the world. It is transformative in its nature. We are called, all of us, not just mothers, all of us are called to share the faith with the next generation, to share with them the hope that is found in Jesus Christ, the promise of God's grace and his mercy. But the greatest moment of that faith is when we sit down with our children and tell them how much God loves them and what Jesus did for each of us. And that is what makes that important and transformative. I hope you'll take time to give thanks for your mother, even if you weren't very close to her. And I know some mothers were not good mothers. But even if you weren't close to her, she chose to bring you into the world. And you need to give thanks for that. And then you need to reach out to God and say, God, heal the brokenness if it's there, and allow it to be made new and fresh, and help me to forgive those things that I need to forgive, and help me to appreciate what I have been given. God bless you. You have a wonderful Mother's Day. I hope everything goes well in your life. And I'd like to say a special appreciation to my wife, Terry. She is a wonderful mother and made a tremendous difference in the life of our children. They would not be the wonderful adults they are without her influence and direction. Thank you, Terry. God bless all of you. Hopefully see you in church.